All right, this is the Coast to Coast Combat Hour. We're coming in on Hump Day after UFC 246 and before Bellator 238. As always, Ed Carbajal here with Drunk Arena attendee Matthew Hawkins, and this week's special guest is Nolan King of MMA Junkie. Welcome, Nolan. Thanks for coming in.
Anytime, guys. Anytime. I'm always here to chat fights. We had some good ones last weekend, and we have no time to rest. We got 2 cards coming up on Saturday, and I'm happy to be here chatting with you guys.
Yeah, it was a wild weekend, and it's nice to get the drunk tag from Ed. I was just bleed a couple weeks ago, but coming from someone that's reaching the obnoxious badge on the Untapped app, it's pretty nice to coming from Ed. Yeah, wild weekend in Vegas. Second time out there for me in about a 5-week span, so that can catch up. But it wasn't the most meaningful card, certainly in UFC history, but a lot of good action pretty much from start to finish. So kept me awake, kept me excited, and that crowd. I mentioned Connor fans before. That crowd can certainly change your emotions as an MMA fan. So it's a pretty wild scene out there when he fights.
Yeah, I don't know what stood out to you guys. I know me and Nolan were very active on Twitter the night of the fights. I mean, we were both writing and covering for our respective outlets. So, I guess we'll just start with what everyone's talking about, the main event, McGregor and Cerrone. I don't know if anybody, Matt knows who I picked, but Nolan, I've been having horrible predictions. I closed out 2019 picking fights horribly, and it looks like I'm starting that way too, because I had picked Cerrone to win, but then obviously the main event, the 42nd finish by McGregor. I don't know, man. What was your takeaway from it?
I mean, yeah, I thought that the card from top to bottom was, like Matt said, the action was there. I like the word that you used, meaningful. I felt like obviously you got a Conor McGregor fight, so there's meaning there, but the rest of the card, from co-main event to the first fight of the night, there was nothing that really screamed off the page like, oh, this is going to have big implications going forward. I mean, the closest thing that you had to that was Macy Barber, and we saw how that went. But yeah, as far as the McGregor fight goes, yeah, I mean, I said this in a tweet too, and I feel like it's better to be explained, over camera or in a conversation. But I had no doubts that Conor McGregor was going to win that fight. I thought that he was going to win it early by knockout. I had said second round. So if I had been told prior to this fight, you're going to wake up Sunday morning and Conor McGregor is going to have knocked out Donald Cerrone, are you surprised? Would you have been impressed by that? I would say no, but I am. He found out a way to even exceed my expectations of what I already expected to be a fight in which he would dominate. So, I mean, again, I think that the way that he did it with the shoulders, with the hip, everything, man, I think that was the type of performance he needs, where people were saying, oh, there's not as much buzz this week for a Conor McGregor fight. I think he's gonna use some of this, or he's gonna use this performance to get that buzz for his next one. I think people are excited about this Conor 2.0 that we're seeing. That's exactly what he needed to do. So in that case, I mean, tip of the cap to him. I think that he's going to be rolling into his next fight.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I mean, I think during our predictions, I predicted Conor to win by knockout. I thought Cerrone had a chance if kind of things went his way and he was able to stretch it out and perhaps get a takedown early and really had a chance to change the momentum. But not really a surprise. I think, but it comes down to what you said, Nolan. I mean, I've the last 2 times I've seen him fight live were against Alvarez and against Cerrone. And neither time was I mean, I'm not a huge McGregor fan. You guys are the big writers. I'm the fan that goes to the fights, been going for a long time. I don't, I'm not afraid to kind of hoard some of my fan biases. I'll say them publicly. But when I leave these events, I can't deny the guy's skills. I mean, you see it and you're just like, I want him to be tested in the fights I go to, but when I go see him fight, he's just knocking everybody out. So I can't really, there's no knock on the guy. He came in here after a long layoff, after a pretty brutal defeat in his last fight. Hadn't won since November of 16 in the Alvarez fight that I mentioned. And like you said, the shoulders, the the head kick. I mean, it was basically Terminator McGregor out there. And I'm a Fedor fan, so that's kind of what Fedor does, especially later in his career. He goes in there and it's kill or be killed, and that's the McGregor. And if he fights like that, I mean, win or lose, honestly, he's going to have a lot of fans. And it was a fun show. Like you said, I thought the only fight that really meant anything was possibly the Barber fight. I wish I had put more money on Modafari. The odds were astronomical. When I got into Vegas, she was like a plus 800, which I thought was crazy. But I didn't lay down enough. I had her on a parlay that didn't work out. But
same here.
It's the girl sitting next to me won $1,200 on her. So nice. There was and but it was fun. Fajeda looked great against Anthony Pettis. I think that could be something that we start to see. He's on a nice little roll right now. His name value with a win over Pettis obviously goes up, and what we've seen, especially with the fight announcements in the last couple of weeks from the UFC, is really name values all that kind of matters right now. Aldo getting a fight off a loss in a division he's never won a fight. Romero, 2 losses in a row. So even when I mentioned the fight main event not necessarily having a ton of meeting, it's hard to, even if McGregor had lost this fight somehow, I still think he gets the Khabib fight at 155. I mean, that's kind of where we're at in the UFC. But for credibility's sake, it was nice to see him get a win and put on an exciting show. What was your thoughts, Ed?
I mean, before I even talk about my horrible mistake with the Modafari Barber, I mean, so I was talking to, before we started recording, and Nolan, you joined us. I was talking about how my picks, we all do the picks at SureDog, and my picks have been super horrible. And but one of the rare things I do is I'll pick a great underdog to win. Like I did it with Masvidal versus Till, and I did it for this event with Modafari and Barber. But when I put my money down, I was a little too specific. I had her picked to win by submission, because that was plus 2,200 if it paid. But obviously that didn't happen. She went for it though, so neither here nor there. But as far as the whole thing, so with the main event, McGregor and Cerrone, one of the things that I wrote about in my 7 takeaways piece. I do this editorial now for MMA News, where I do 7 takeaways for every pay-per-view event. And the last one that I wrote about was I know we're praising McGregor, and everyone, a lot of folks had him picked to win. I actually said that's a possibility when I was making my prediction about him, finishing the fight early, which he did. But one of the things I think, as far as we're looking at Cerrone and how he performed, it was only 40 seconds, but I think, the guy fought like 5 times in 12 months, and he lost to Gaethje, Ferguson, and I forget all the list, but I think at his age, especially when you train and take damage, it's not like he left all those fights unscathed. He lost, and I think that damage just keeps carrying over and over, and that anywhere, anytime attitude, it's cool and it's fun, but I think we see the result of it when you're just doing too much. The body, he's still a human being. So and that's my takeaway from that particular fight. It's not a knock on Cerrone. Obviously he said he's not going to retire, but I do think he should probably take some time off and maybe just most guys average 3 fights a year. Maybe he should try to be a little more human as a competitor, versus knocking him the way that Stephen A. Smith did. And Nolan, I know you wrote about that over at Junkie. So I don't know if you wanted a floor to voice anything else about that. This is the place to do it, my man.
Yeah, no doubt. And I feel like, myself, or I wrote an article about it for Junkie, and there were some other outlets that also wrote similar articles using the same quotes. And, I saw a lot of people kind of criticize the write-up for 2 reasons, one of which was, or I guess really one reason, which is, who cares what Stephen A. Smith thinks? And I think that is kind of almost a point of me writing that, was who cares what Stephen A. Smith thinks, but in turn, more so that he shouldn't be on the broadcast when he's saying things like that. And I saw some people defend him saying, oh, well, what did he say that was wrong? Cowboy did look atrocious. And yeah, it was not a good performance by any means when you go out and get knocked out in 40 seconds and don't land a punch. But if you start claiming that the guys are quitting, which is what he was doing and what he was insinuating, if you look at the quotes, that's wrong. And for somebody to be up, that's where I draw the line, where it's like, okay, you're on the ESPN broadcast, you're one of the UFC, like the UFC broadcast partners, people that is literally standing up there and supposed to give your take on the sport. If you're giving takes like that, they're worthless other than they get conversations going about how bad you are. And I understand that's kind of the culture of his show and the Skip Baylesses of the world, where they say these things and people just like to argue with them or laugh at them or whatever, and they get in fights. But I would prefer not to see that on a broadcast, and that's kind of where my article was coming from. It wasn't that I care about or I take his argument into consideration. It's more he shouldn't be on the broadcast is what kind of the point I was trying to draw by providing evidence to people.
I have a little bit of a take on that. And I don't even really, I don't like defending Stephen A. Smith. I guess my defense for him would be that he is the number one guy technically on ESPN. So the UFC signs him on. I don't like he's a part of it either. I don't think he should be on it. I compared him to the guy who sits around the water cooler on the Monday after a fight and is commenting on the fights. That's, I mean, I would say that's the casual fans or the fan that just watches the big fights. It's hard to watch that and not say Cowboy looked atrocious. The give up thing is a totally different ball game. There's no excuse for that. But throughout the history of MMA, I mean, when Tim Sylvia fought Fedor, nobody left that going, well, Tim Sylvia looked good. He got finished in 36 seconds. I mean, there's certain, just because we love Cowboy, I think we got to admit that he didn't look great. I mean, even if it's not out of his control. Sure, Conor broke his nose with a shoulder, but basically, 8 seconds into the fight, all that said and done, we can't defend him too much. I mean, if a quarterback goes out and throws 7 interceptions, you don't say, well, he had a good week last week. Sure. I mean, it's just, so that's my defense of that. I guess my other defense would be for guys like Joe Rogan to sit there and act smug about it. Let's not forget Joe Rogan said that Ronda Rousey would beat half of the men at 135 pounds. So, there's stupid shit said by even the guys that we consider the smartest minds in MMA, which is Joe Rogan. So I agree he shouldn't be having a part of it, but I feel like that's kind of like when you sign a deal with the devil, in a sense, signing with ESPN. This is what you're going to get. Nobody thought ESPN had any good takes. I mean, we have Dana White now talking about doing deals with Bob Arum. We've all heard what Bob Arum has said. If Bob Arum gets on the air, we're likely to hear some more gibberish that makes no sense to big MMA fans. So it's just kind of one of those things. I don't think Stephen A. Smith meant insulting as far as, I don't think he saw the big picture of how it would be taken. I think he was like doing an analyzation, like as if he was watching a football game or something. And like I said, a quarterback threw 5 interceptions. He's there to criticize. Cerrone, from an outside perspective of somebody who's not big into the game, it arguably can deserve a little to be criticized for getting finished in 40 seconds. So I feel bad for defending Stephen A, but that's kind of the way I felt. And that's how I felt like that's kind of the take of the fan vibe in Vegas was Cowboy shouldn't have really been in there. But it's all hindsight. I mean, we're all excited going into the fights.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things, but yeah, I prefer he didn't be in there. I don't know if there's anybody in ESPN who really qualifies to even, I suppose Max Kellerman, perhaps because of his boxing background, but I've also heard him say some really stupid stuff about UFC and MMA over the years. So it's when you got talking heads, I think you're just bound to get. I mean, their shows are based off opinions.
Too many talking heads. I mean, I guess there are so many talking heads there that because of the how big the event was, but. I mean, my take was it's funny because like I kept thinking what you said, whoever commented on your thing, Nolan, I was like, yeah, you know what? That's why they have Stephen A. Smith doing things like that, because they know he's going to rile people up and get them interacting with the content and looking at the video and stuff like that. And the other thing was too that because Luke Thomas even said something about why didn't they have Max Kellerman, and I was just like, well, maybe somebody had a scheduled day off or somebody called out sick and they were like, hey, Steven, we know you like running your mouth. Why don't you just jump in there even though you don't know anything? Because he was pretty open about. I mean, it's weird because it's like one of those things where when someone's going to insult you, they'll be like, yeah, you know what? I like your work. I like everything you do, but you're still an asshole. You know what I mean? It's like he did one of those things where he was like saying I don't know anything, but then he still came with his vitriol that he likes to. I guess he's known for being just upset about everything. I don't know. I really don't follow other sports, so whatever for him.
Yeah, and it's really like the culture of I totally get Matt's point of why he's on there in terms of like he's popular, he's ESPN's go-to guy, he draws viewers, everything like that. So maybe the problem that I have with it is bigger culturally than just MMA. That it's more about who can say something that gets the most attention versus who can say something that's the most meaningful. So I mean, there's a lot of different ins and outs of this whole thing, and I'm not stupid. I totally understand the business side of Stephen A. Smith. I mean, again, there's just I go back and forth in my head because I think that his knowledge of MMA is different than his knowledge of football. Like I think he knows how football is played. I think he knows how basketball is played. But when you're up there and you're saying all he landed was a kick, what did he say? A leg kick to the body. That was all he landed, and it's like, well, a leg kick to the body is not a thing. That's not. I get it. I get it, but I draw the line at a certain point, I guess is where I would put myself in this debate.
I think maybe we can come to an agreement that it was the wrong place and the time for it. If he wants to do it on his Monday morning show with whoever he's on there, Skip Bayless or whoever he's arguing with for that week on his show, I think that's a totally different thing. If you're doing it actually 15, 20 minutes right after the fight, standing next to the cage, next to Daniel Cormier, Joe Rogan, in their UFC microphones or whatever the heck's going on, that's maybe a little out of place to be bashing the guy. I guess you wouldn't see Stephen A. Smith go up into the booth immediately after a football game, stand there with Troy Aikman and start bashing the guy.
That was the weird thing was it was like the first thought that we had after that event, the first thing we saw, the first like digestion we got was them cutting to Stephen A. Smith, who then was the first person to really talk in the conversation. So I think it just kind of came at us fast. Like if this was, I don't know, the next morning, I probably wouldn't have been a big deal, I don't think, to anybody or on a show, like you said. But it was just kind of especially like, I feel like he's good for those morning shows, but to have him like as like a post-game person was even weird to begin with. I don't know if he does that with other sports too, that I'm just, not remembering. But for me, I've always considered him to be like the morning guy that getting these heated debates and there's an audience for that. So that would be one thing, but that was the guy the UFC was shoving in your ESPN was shoving in your face as soon as the fight ended.
Yeah, I thought it was the wrong time for that. Now that we talk about it, that makes more sense to me because I don't think you would see him on the field or on the basketball court or anything like that. I mean, minutes after the fight or after a game. So, I guess only other thing I have a question for you is where do you see Alexei Olenek? I know he's 43 years old. He basically lost kind of a title contender shot to Overeem, a fight or two ago now. I don't know what his fight contract situation is. He's one of the guys that I think would be a perfect like retirement fight for Fedor in Russia. So part of me kind of almost want to see him lose this fight, but I mean, the guy's just a magician on the mat. Ed being a BJJ guy, I just, what is your opinion on that guy and where he kind of stands in the all-time scheme of MMA?
Yeah, he's an anomaly of sorts, so it's kind of hard to place him. He has a very unique skill set. He's older. You watch him fight, and it looks like, I think, I was saying this to somebody else, my favorite part of when these big fights happen where the whole world's watching Conor McGregor or the BMF title or Jones Cormier is these other outside peripheral fighters that get kind of dragged into like the public spotlight because they're in the fights leading up to these big fights. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of interesting going online and seeing how he attracted people's attention, like that he was this old dude, Russian guy who doesn't, he's very, he looks like he fits the part. You know what I mean? Like he's a 43-year-old Russian dude, doesn't look like he's a freak athlete or anything, but he goes in there and just tosses these guys and submits them. So it's hard because when he has been put in there against, good strikers like Overeem. I'm trying to think, was Walt Harris the other one?
Harris, yeah.
That was kind of an injury type weird finish, but it's tough. So, I mean, I would treat him like I would any other contender, get him back in, get him somebody that's a ranked opponent next, see what happens. But yeah, I mean, he walked away unscathed. I just wrote up the medical suspensions, and I think he had like 45 days or something. So he can be rebooked right away. And, yeah, I mean, we'll give him a top 15 guy again and see how it goes. I wouldn't hold back. Clearly, he can hold his own, and Again, the skill set's the big thing, though. The uniqueness of the skill set in the heavyweight division. There's not a lot of guys that can do that. So he has really a chance against most of the top 15, especially with how we know these things go down with the big men, where there's a lot of times not rhyme or rhythm to what's going on in terms of who wins and who doesn't.
How does a match with Verdun? Verdun just got his contract or his suspension dropped, right?
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I love that fight. I think that would be a good one. The UFC's going back to Russia, I believe, in June, I think is what I've heard. I don't know if that's like official or if it's signed, set and sealed or whatever, but that's like the rumblings right now is that they'll be back in June. So that would maybe be a good time frame if you wanted to wait out, a little bit longer than – because when's Verdun back? Is it March or something?
Yeah, I think so. I just saw that he was dropped to 10 months or something.
Yeah, I wrote that article from MMA Junkie. I should have remember that, but all the USADA stuff kind of blends together. But I believe it was like sometime around then. It was let's see, reduced. He'll be back on April 1st. So. That would be within that time frame. Maybe they both want to get in there before then, but either way, I think that's a matchup that makes itself.
Yeah. Well, one of the things about the when you get two grapplers like that together, though, it's the same thing. Like when I heard the news of Gilbert Burns and Damian Maia facing each other soon.
How much do you love that fight?
I mean, I love it, and it's funny because Burns is talking about how he wants to get the torch of jiu-jitsu and carry it in the UFC as the jiu-jitsu guy, which he definitely can. And I love the fight, but it's not a jiu-jitsu match.
Yes.
So when you see stuff like that, it's going to be it's the same thing like when you see two strong wrestlers, you don't expect them to go for takedowns. Kind of like Usman and Covington. Their grappling cancels each other out, and I think they're going to test each other in striking. But so it's the same thing when you talk about the matchup with Verdum and Olenek. I feel like they're just going to cancel their grappling out and try to swing for the fences or whatever it may be. But about the fight with him and Green, another one of my bad picks. I picked Green to win just because he's younger and I thought he could probably clap up Olenek enough just to make him quit or fatigue him or something like that. I mean, even though Olenek was fatigued, I feel like the fans in the I feel like I caught that fans in the arena were bored with that fight, even though I thought it was technically fun for me as a jiu-jitsu guy. I loved watching them back and forth. That Kesagatami that in the first round that would have made most people tap. That was like, how long was he in that position? It was a long time. And Green didn't tap. And then obviously he wound up getting submitted later with the armbar. That was kind of in a weird position. But when you're good at jiu-jitsu like that at the level that Olenek is, you're going to get the submission you're going for. If it's one, you move on to the other, and that's what he did. But I mean, were they booing that fight, Matt, when you were there, or were you too drunk to pay attention?
Once again, I don't buy the $19 beers inside T-Mobile there, Ed. Were they booing it? The first round, not so much. But the second round, I think the boos came because of the angle of the armbar and the way when you're in the arena, if you're not looking at, it's different when the TV's right there. You can actually kind of see it happening. To the untrained eye in the arena, it looked almost more like a guy just kind of laying on top of a guy in an odd position. So I think that was probably more of any kind of booing there. I mean, obviously you could tell both guys were getting fatigued.
Yeah.
So I think we were in for a bit of a slop fest had that gotten to the third round. I think a lot of people there were rooting for Green. The Russia thing in America, depending on the crowd and stuff, obviously you can get people that cheer openly against the Russian fighters and stuff. So I think that there was a lot of people rooting for Green. And then the fact that he kind of had a chance in that second round when Olenek was tired and didn't really show a whole lot of savviness to kind of avoid the clinch. And it just kind of, he kind of fell into it. He was obviously tired too, but I think that was a combination. And then once they hit the ground there in that armbar position, I mean, I didn't think he was going to finish that armbar. He got it with about 20 seconds left or so, or 30 seconds left. I thought Green was going to hold out, and then obviously he kind of raised his hips there and did the final little lock on it. But
the thing with those submissions, especially when you're looking at guys that train MMA gloves and stuff like that, I mean, it's you can crank the arm even if the guy's resistant, you can crank the arm in weird and awkward ways because of the way the glove kind of gives you that extra handle on the guy's limb when you're going for it. You know, guys used to train with. I mean, they do it for when they're getting ready for MMA fights because they have to know how to deal with that. You know, because like me, I grapple with no gloves. But if I had a glove on, probably most of my armbar escapes wouldn't work because that end piece, the weakest point of the limb, is always going to be stuck at the end of that submission because of the glove. So that's kind of what happened with Green, as it looked like he was kind of getting out, and only kind of just cranked it and hipped in, and that was that. I mean, it looked painful when you watch it in slow motion, actually. But anyway, I mean, I don't know what else to take away from 246. It kind of set the tone of what we're going to look for the rest of the year in the UFC. And I mean, obviously, Nolan, you guys probably get the most hot takes and have written the most stuff about where to go from as far as whether he's going to do 170, 155, Masvidal, Usman, Nate Diaz. You know, obviously the Khabib thing. It seems like, you know, Dana White's pushing for the Khabib thing, but we know to usually go the opposite of what he says. But by the way he does stuff. So I don't know what's your take on where we go from here.
I mean, there are options. It's a good problem to have. Sometimes we have the opposite problem where there's not enough contenders or whatever. So to have you know, big fights are going to happen regardless. We have a handful of mix and match fighters that we can pair together to make these fights. So it's really just a matter of who. I'm not a huge fan of Connor's definitely next for Khabib for like a couple of reasons. One being that I don't remember the last time that like Dana's openly talked about the next fight beyond a title fight that's already scheduled.
Yeah.
Just totally ruling out Tony Ferguson like he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You know, usually even when Dana starts to go that way, he'll say, well, you know, Khabib's got to get through Tony Ferguson first. You know, he's got to get through, and he's not really doing that for this. He was just very flat out saying, oh, this is what's going to happen next. And for me, I just think logistically, like McGregor's healthy. He didn't get a medical suspension at all. He could fight tomorrow if he wanted to. For him to wait all the way to April, and then who knows how Khabib's going to come out of that fight. You know, who knows what's going to happen when he'll want to fight again. So, and I feel like it's going to be a struggle to get this fight done on Khabib's end. So, you know, in a perfect world, yeah, that would be cool that if everything lined up perfectly and, you know, nobody was hurt and everything worked according to plan and you could have this on International Fight Week, whatever. But I don't think that's the case. And I don't understand if McGregor wants to fight 3 to 4 times this year, Khabib is going to make him stray from that plan, in my opinion.
Yeah, they can't do that in July anyway because of Ramadan.
Oh, yeah, correct, because of Ramadan. That's a whole other thing, you know?
Yeah, so you lose what
and Vegas. Because Khabib won't fight in Vegas anymore.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, he said that. I mean, I was talking to friends that were asking me kind of how they saw the schedule playing out, and ideally for me, I would think you would do something like Masvidal maybe in May,
yes.
And then if he beats Masvidal, which is right now the money fight, I think, just for a crazy over the top promotion and obviously, I mean, it's gonna sell it no matter what. But if you do that in like May, then it kind of puts Connor wins that fight. He really can make his play at that point for whatever the hell he wants to do. He could challenge Khabib, and Dana will obviously have no problem giving that, or he can go after Usman. And I think it sets that both up possibly for like MSG in November. I know that would be a nice little. It would be about a 6-month break. But after 2 fights for a guy who hasn't fought, has fought 1 time in like 3 years or twice now, I guess, in 3 years. A little bit of extra time, especially to go from a guy like Cowboy and Masvidal, and then to be ready for a guy like Usman or Khabib again, probably wouldn't hurt Connor. Anytime he gets on the mat, preparing for those guys wouldn't hurt. So that's kind of the way I see it. I just don't know if there's any big events. Vegas is obviously booked already for March 7th. And then April, they're already in Brooklyn. So I don't know what venue, unless you open something up like Cowboy Stadium or, I don't know where you would take Connor, Hawaii. I mean, I don't know where you would do a fight with Masvidal where it would be a big enough fight in a month like May, where you would take that fight. That would be, I guess, my only question. Maybe Boston. I don't, something like that, I suppose would make some sense, but I can't really picture a fight of that magnitude taking place out of Vegas or New York if it gets made.
And another issue too, I think, with this whole, I always look at it like hedging bets almost. And for McGregor and Masvidal, say that they go the route Dana's saying, where McGregor's going to fight Habib next. That would line up Masvidal and Usman, and we got two strikers versus two really good grapplers. There's a possibility that they both go out there, get smothered, and I feel like you're going to end up halting two guys that are as on fire. I mean, McGregor's obviously been more popular before, but they're peak popularity in the sport right now, the two of them, and for you to be able to match them up and also have the other divisions thrive. It's not like you're going to have champions on hold here. There are options out there for both guys, more so obviously for Habib than for Usman, but Usman's hurt too. Apparently he's got a hand injury, so who knows how long that's going to be. So, man, I think Masvidal McGregor's a fight to make, and it's going to be too bad if they go otherwise, because those other fights will always be there. They'll always be the lightweight option for McGregor, and they'll always, in my opinion, Masvidal has carved out enough of a space now where he's going to, even if he went out and lost to McGregor, like, you could throw him in a big welterweight fight and people would be interested.
Yeah, and if you look at the way that if you rewatch the press conference and the way they were both looking at things McGregor said and things that Dana White said, if you look long term, they obviously they love planning way ahead. Then the news came out of Usman being hurt, so we're probably not going to see Masvidal Usman. International Fight Week, they usually like to stack that anyway. McGregor Masvidal would be perfect for an event like International Fight Week, and then whoever's left standing from that. Because if he has to do Khabib and McGregor again, I mean, why not bring that to the Garden? Khabib would prefer to fight there anyway, and they usually like to, and with the exception of 230, they usually like to come really big to MSG when they do come to the Garden. So I don't know, that's where I see it going. McGregor said that he wanted to do 3 fights in the year. If he's going to stick to that, we got 2 more to look forward to out of him. I mean, I would personally, this is just me and my being a fan, I would like to see him Justin Gaethje, just because I like fights like that. I think Gaethje is a good fight for anybody. Maybe people see Gaethje losing. Maybe he doesn't do the best, but I mean, Gaethje makes an entertaining fight. That they don't call him the highlight for nothing. But I mean, that's where I stand with it. But yeah, I could see McGregor and Masvidal more likely than all of the options we just talked about.
How about we just get rid of all weight cutting and we have these guys fighting? You know what I mean? Like, that was a frustration when you got a main event where they have Cowboy and McGregor, and it's given that the reason they're doing that is because they don't want anybody to have trouble making weight and that fight getting canceled last minute, especially with the depth of this card. But then you have Claudia Gadelha and Alexa Grasso. Let's just cut the bullshit and sign that fight for a 125-pound fight. Why are we even cutting weight anymore? Let's look at the weight classes they're in. When they sign for the 155-pound fight, they fight at 165 pounds. You know what I mean? Like, I think we got to get to that point too before we go there. I know Kavanaugh's calling for Gaethje at 170 pounds. I mean, it's great if they don't have to cut weight, but it's a weird dynamic to me to have Dana White saying how great somebody looks, not having to cut weight, and then you literally have other people on the card who are missing out on paydays because they're struggling to cut weight, and it doesn't make any sense to me. So, I mean, if I had one wish in 2020, it would be that we figure out this whole weight cutting thing, and we get we stop having fights canceled. And I mean, the Grasso, I don't mean to get on a rant here, but the Grasso Gadelha thing, I just found ridiculous because Grasso misses weight by 5 pounds or 5.5 pounds. Gadelha weighs in, makes 115. I don't remember if she weighed in at 115 or 116, but whatever, the difference was 5.5 pounds. And then the commission says, well, there's a 3-pound separation limit between the two. Could nobody tell Grasso that Gadelha she can go drink a glass of water and we can have this fight? I mean, all she puts 2 pounds on, all of a sudden it's a legit fight. She just doesn't cut that much, or she goes and drinks a quart of water. I mean, it just seems weird to me that's how we're figuring this out now, because I mean, from Gadelha's perspective, I don't know if she got paid her show person or not. I haven't seen any of that, but she okay. Did she get her win purse?
I did not see that. That seemed to be left out, so I would guess not.
So, I mean, potentially she lost out on double pay. She lost out potentially on a bonus, fight night bonus, and she lost out on 30% of Grasso's purse because all over the fact that she literally could have drank a glass of water or stopped cutting weight 15 minutes earlier, and so it's just crazy to me that that's, if the fights are accepted, unless the doctor shut down Grasso, which I think they kind of threw in there at the end to try to cover their ass a little bit. A 5 pound, I mean, we have heavyweight fights where people are 45 pounds, 50-pound difference, but all of a sudden when they're 115, 5 pounds, or 3.1 pounds apparently would have been enough to cancel the fight and cost somebody, Gadelia, who makes good pay, probably lost out on the opportunity to make another $150,000 if she goes out there and has a great performance. So I just thought that's kind of crazy, but that's my that's my take on that.
Well, there's not for nothing. I mean, it's the first big event of the year. We got another one coming this weekend with Bellator 238. I don't know if it's on anyone's radar or under the radar. I mean, folks seem because I know there's a UFC event in Raleigh, right? UFC Raleigh's that Saturday too. But I mean, I'm gonna be I can only watch one, so I'm gonna watch this one. And I know Matt, you're gonna be there, so it's I feel like that might be the more popular event, being that it's Chris Cyborg's debut there for the featherweight title. So I figure we could look at that card and see what we can see on the main card of what we think of the main card of Bellator coming up this weekend. So this is the first fight on the main card. I don't know if you guys want to start with this one, or do you want to go from the main event and work our way down? It's up to you.
You can work up. Ava Knight's a former champion boxer. Made her debut about 6 months ago at a Bellator card again in the Forum I was at. I think she was the first fight of the night that night. Got a knockout win. Not a spectacular showing, but I think that they're just trying to work on that division. I think that the 115-pound dilemma in Bellator is finding fights for Kerry Melendez, who they can obviously push and can be a face for their lighter weight women's division. So I think that that's basically why they're putting this fight on the card, is to try to not only kind of have a women start the main card and finish the main card, but give them something to try to work for to start creating some fights in that weight class.
What do you think of this fight, this matchup, Nolan?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I don't know much about Emily, even though we share a last name. I believe there's two Kings back to back on this card. I don't know if I've seen that before. I'm not supposed to be biased here, but that it's really swaying me now that I see it, because I think Tapology has her listed under a different last name. So I'm not sure. Maybe she just got married, or maybe we haven't updated a Tapology, or maybe Bellator hasn't. But regardless, Ava Knight, serious boxing credentials coming over, like Matt said. She looked decent in her first fight. She got the TKO. So we'll see. It's one of those longer-term projects. I don't think anything's going to be perfect. Seeing that King has 7 pro fights versus, the one that Knight has, I mean, that's good that she's getting in there against other experienced opponents. So other people that are taking it somewhat seriously. They're not the 0-1 or 1-4 or something. So I mean, we'll see. I think it will be a good test, a good build. Just judging off of the information that I have on paper in front of me here.
Yeah, I mean, it always seemed like when Bellator pushes a fighter, they pull somebody out with that's kind of an unknown for them to kind of make their debut or whatever you want to call it against. And I know she's got more fights in her or whatever, but I mean, if Knight has a strong boxing pedigree, I don't know much about her record in boxing and stuff, but if she's supposed to be really good at it, I would imagine this might lean towards her, but you never know. I mean, a lot of these debut fighters that they put on, I mean, this is the main card, but the person on the other side of the cage from them is always really looking forward to upsetting their debut. So, I mean, I guess I'll go with the one that has a photo on Bellator's website. So,
smart pick.
Yeah,
you've done this before.
And there's the other King that you were talking about, Nolan.
I like this.
Do they have a Krispy Kreme sponsor for this event?
Yeah, true. However, being the B-side in back-to-back Bellator fights against people that Bellator are trying to push.
Yeah.
Could be an 0-2 night for the Kings. So it's making me a little nervous here. You know, if they take an L, I take an L. So be 0-3 on the night, and I don't know if I like that, but it's kind of the way that I'm feeling here.
Well, based on their pictures, they look like they're related. So we will. No, I think this is a good fight. I mean, I think this is a fun fight. Raymond Daniels, former Glory kickboxing champion, somebody I've had the pleasure to watch fight live 3 or 4 times. In Glory, I've never seen him fight MMA. He's coming off a spectacular, like, spinning tornado punch knockout. Just a human highlight reel. I don't think he's ever going to be a huge contender in Bellator, but I can tell you right now, if he can manage to somehow get his record into that double-digit win column, a fight before he gets too old here, a fight between him and like MVP would be something to watch. I mean, that would be some street level or Street Fighter video game level shit if that ever happened.
Yeah, I mean, one thing about his from his Glory fights anyway, his kickboxing fights. I mean, he's got a really nice setup to. He does doing that spinning kick, but he also does a roundhouse kick and shoots it right back in so that it goes the lead leg, and he catches a lot of guys in the liver when he's not doing like the headshots that highlight reel that made it on ESPN. So, he's got some really nice body finishes. So, I don't know if I think obviously anybody that goes against anyone that has a really strong striking background, I would imagine Jason King is training in his getting him to the ground and nullifying all of that, because if he's not standing, he's got no tools. So but like we said, we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm not gonna make a pick here because he's only 1-1 in MMA, and you never, like I said, if he gets to the ground, that I think that's when we'll see how much time he needs to work in the cage before he becomes a true favorite. So I'm just gonna stay away from that one. And I think the next one is Mr. Pettis' debut. How did they not get his picture on Bellator's website? But anyway,
you know how the UFC
looks
owns
like a
everybody's
couple of
rights.
kings. It's like
Yeah, they look like kings to me.
But I mean, I actually started writing something for 5 Fights to Watch piece I'm doing for MMAnews.com. This is one of them because it's Pettis' debut. And again, like when they push a guy, usually like the UFC's guys, when they go there, they get a push, and I don't know if Pettis is getting that there just yet, but just judging by Alfred's last name, I feel like he's probably one rough customer.
Yeah, I don't know much about him. Obviously, we all know Sergio Pettis. Alfred Kashakian,
yep.
Kashakian. 3-fight winning streak. Last loss was actually to Sean O'Malley, which is what I'm seeing here. Win over Chris Beal, though, former UFC fighter, right before that fight. So obviously he's got some experience. Again, 3-fight win streak. So Bellator tends, when they bring in guys, they tend to give guys kind of a fight to showcase their skills. That could be what the case is here, but I think this will be another case where, kind of like we saw with Bolaños in his last fight, things don't always necessarily shape out like, how they expect. I think you get some of these guys who also sign with Bellator and think maybe some of their competition is going to be a little. I mean, this isn't Benavidez he's fighting, but it's also with 11-4 record and some wins over some good fighters and being in the cage with some good guys. It's nobody to overlook. So should be an interesting fight. I like to see Pettis get a finish. I feel like I haven't seen him get a finish in a long time. So
Kashakian's not a bum, that's for sure. Unlike if you look at the resumes of the 3 unknowns that we've talked about so far on this card, I think he's the most legitimate of them all by far. But there's levels to this. Obviously, Sergio Pettis, former top contender in the UFC. So, I'm guessing Pettis will still be the favorite. But Kashakian's actually a pretty decent fighter. Like Matt pointed out, he lost to Sean O'Malley on the Contender Series. He lost to Ricardo Ramos on Dana White's Looking for a Fight when they were up in Maine. And then he also he has lost to Juan Archuleta. So he's lost to good guys, and he has wins over UFC vets. Albert Morales he knocked out. He's coming off of 3 straight knockouts. he also trains under Edmund Taverdian at Glendale Fighting, so fits in line with the the Shabazian Gambarian last name. Is that Armenian, right, or Albanian?
Yeah, Armenian.
Armenian is
Armenian.
Nice
crazy.
judo stuff from those guys.
Yeah, I mean, hey, that if he's following the path that Edmund Shabazian is, like, I'm sure his tools are sharp. I'm sure he's got sharp striking. It's just a matter of you're going up against a guy that at one point in time was a top 4 or 5 guy in the world and might still be. So we'll see what happens, but I think it'll be a good fight. It's not a huge blowout.
Bantamweight feature, but I think the next one is going to be.
Yeah, we start to get fire here now.
Yeah. So I mean, Nolan, I know you like to be unbiased or whatever, but I mean, you can't. How do you not love this fight?
Yeah, it's a great fight, man. It makes a lot of sense. And I know before the tournament started, the Featherweight Grand Prix, Scott Coker had said, I believe it was actually in the press release, that shortly after the first round concluded, they would decide an alternate fight going forward. I asked both fighters about this, and neither one of them said that they had heard anything about it. But to me, this could be an alternate bout. It looks very similar to what you would have in a tournament that would be an alternate bout. Corrales and Archuleta both coming off first round of the tournament losses, but they're both, they both lost to good guys, and they're both still top of the division, exciting fighters that people want to see. So it's a tough matchup. I'm going to lean towards Archuleta just because Corrales, he seems like a lot of times when he picks up those marquee wins, he kind of has to take a beating to get there. Whereas Archuleta, I think, is technical enough to not let him off the hook. But it's a close fight, man. I think this is going to be one of the better fights on the card, and it's kind of a hidden gem here. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it per se, compared to obviously the headliner and co-headliner. No,
I predict that this will be the early fight of the year candidate after 25 days of 2020. I just think it's gonna. I think you're in probably for a stand-up war. Both guys can are heavily durable. They both take shots, wear them well. I think Corral. It's hard to say. They're both huge power punches. I mean, they both have one punch KO power. Corrales might be somebody who kind of looks for it a little bit more than Archuleta, but I think Archuleta squeaks one out here. I don't know if we get a finish. It's a 3-round fight and a 5-round fight. I probably would see a knockout coming, but I could see Archuleta doing some stuff on the feet, and then perhaps maybe you working a little bit of groundwork to kind of wrap this fight up. Corrales, I mean, Caldwell's a different animal, but Caldwell pretty much held him down for all 3 rounds of their opening round fight. So, I mean, if Corrales has a weakness, it's certainly on the ground. So, but I think we're in for a barn burner here.
Absolutely.
And like I said, it only makes sense. I assumed it was I was going to ask you, but I assumed it was a alternate fight. I mean, I can't even think of anybody else you'd throw in there. And whoever wins this fight, I mean, as you said, Archuleta coming off the loss to the champion. I mean, he was arguably the number 2 seed already going into the tournament. He takes on the champion in the first round, and Corrales was right there after his big win over Pico, getting in there, and then he got the tough draw of getting the grind out wrestler. So. Yeah, I think it's gonna be outstanding. That's one of the ones I'm looking forward to here.
Definitely, man. Me too. This one, hard for me to call. I mean, after Caldwell's performance, I mean, I keep thinking about his performance in the Garden, but I know he's a little heavier, obviously, coming in for since it's a featherweight Grand Prix quarterfinal. And Borik's undefeated. I feel like he hasn't gotten enough attention. I think this Grand Prix is probably getting him the attention he deserves. But I wouldn't, just because he's got the extra weight, I wouldn't be surprised if Caldwell grinds out a victory here. It might not be something folks like watching, but it could be lean towards him in that manner using his wrestling. But Borix has obviously done well against wrestlers before, so it's another one that I'm just excited to watch. What do you think, Nolan? What's your take?
Yeah, I'm excited for it as well. I think this is finally Adam Borix has reached a level that everybody's wanted to see him compete at. I mean, Pat Carney's obviously a great win. Aaron Pico's a great win. But I think this is now really the upper echelon of Bellator's 145-pound division, top tier. if this was not in a tournament, this would be maybe a number one contender fight. So this is that level where, okay, now Adam Borges, we're going to see what happens when he inevitably gets challenged to some extent. I mean, we haven't really seen him get challenged too much or have to deal with too much adversity. So I'm excited to see this one. I think that, like you said, Borges has done well against wrestlers before. However, Darian Caldwell, is that a different beast? I would say probably. Just matters how much. It just means all we have to take into account is how much of a beast is Darian Caldwell compared to what Aaron Borix is able to do in the wrestling category. Is he able to nullify Caldwell's attack? I'm excited for it. I think it's a great co-main event, and especially with the eyeballs that Cyborg will have on this card, it'll give them a little bit extra shine, and I'm excited for it, man. I think this might be my favorite fight on the card.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
I'm curious to see how it goes. I think it's going to be. I don't mean to disagree with you guys. I think it could be a hit or miss fight. I think the 5 rounds gives Borix a little bit more of a chance than if it was a 3-round fight, because I think Caldwell, obviously, when we saw his strategy against Corrales, I think it kind of Caldwell basically holds a lot of the chips here as far as the excitement possible level of this fight. If he goes for the takedown and it's just a blanket, which he's very capable of doing, it could definitely slow the fight down quite a bit. If he's trying for submissions, if he's actually trying for a TKO finish, obviously that opens the door for Borix to be able to, transition out of certain positions and add some scrambles and such. So I just think it comes down to a find out, like you said, how Borix is going to do against a wrestler. And perhaps we'll find out if 145 is just too big for Caldwell when we start getting into the top level competition. So I hope it's a good fight. It is 5-rounder. So, I mean, I'm picking Caldwell. I think he'll probably grind out enough to win a decision here. But I'd love to see like a Masvidal flying knee to start this thing and
Yeah.
and gear us up for this super fight to finish the night out.
Yeah, super fight main event. I don't know. I've been reading a lot from. I know Bud did interviews like a couple weeks ago, and I'm starting to read them now. Stuff she said. I mean, she feels like she's getting overlooked. I mean, it's hard not to see why the odds are in Cyborg's favor, given Cyborg's record and experience in the sport. But I mean, obviously her last fight, she didn't look good when she lost to wait, no, she won her last fight, right? She left on a win, UFC.
Yeah, she beat Spencer.
Yeah, that's right. So she beat Spencer, but before that, she lost to Nunes. Then they had the whole back and forth thing about Nunes, whatever. So, I mean, maybe folks are forgetting or whatever, but I wouldn't be surprised if Bud pulls out an upset here. I mean, Cyborg's been fighting for a long time, and if we go back to what we talked about, when we're looking at Cerrone in 246. Granted, she hasn't been as busy as him, but I mean, it depends on what Cyborg we see. If she fights smart, the way she fought Spencer, the way she fought Holly Holm, I think she might get this, get the night over with early enough. But I mean, Bud's no slouch. She's evolved a lot, and she's not the champion for nothing. So, I'm gonna. I know Bud is the underdog, but I wouldn't be surprised if she pulls off a victory. But obviously, we're all expecting Cyborg to win, I think. Anyway, what about you, Nolan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is going to be the first time in a little while, excluding the Amanda Nunes fight, that Cyborg is going to have the fight brought to her as much as Julia Budd's going to bring it. With that said, I think Cyborg is a step above Bud, but I just think that maybe Bud will be a little bit more open to being aggressive compared to some of the other opponents that Cyborg's had. I think it will be fun. I think Bud will maybe have her moments where she'll impress people, but I ultimately think Cyborg will get it done. I'm going to say like later in the 4th round or 5th round championship rounds, I think she might end it. But I think Bud's going to prove to be one of the more tough tests that Cyborg's faced recently. I know that's not a high threshold considering she went from just dominating everyone to the Evanger fight was kind of a stinker, and then having the eventually having the title fight against Nunes where she got starched. So I think it'll be a good fight back and forth. I think it'll be more competitive than people think, but I also think Cyborg will win by TKO late in the fight.
Yeah, I think Cyborg wins this fight as well. I think it'll be interesting to see if not that, I mean, Nunes is her own animal, but if you if you fight Cyborg and you throw straight punches, if you can get him in there, I think that's the key. I also think the key is not being afraid of Chris Cyborg. So I don't think Julia Budd's going to fear her going into this fight, like perhaps we would have seen a little bit more of the Tyson-esque, feel if without that Nunes fight. So I think you have. I mean, you saw Felicia Spencer go in there and give a solid showing and didn't show a lot of fear, but Cyborg overwhelmed her. This is I can't, other than this is a huge step up in competition, basically for Bud. I mean, I know she fought Ronda Rousey earlier in her career, and she had a ladder fight with Marlos Conan, who was kind of on the other side of her career when that fight happened. But I think we see Cyborg hit Bud fairly early. Bud try to scramble. Cyborg maybe push it off and end up landing some stuff while Bud's getting a little bit desperate for a takedown. And Cyborg, like Connor the other night, like Fedor in his fight, when she has her opponent down and injured, there's no you don't get a second, like Stephen A asked for. you don't get a chance to catch your breath and roam around the cage and figure out what your next move is. If Cyborg has you hurt, she's going in for the kill. I'm thinking early third round. Bud could come out, like I said, if she's throwing straight punches, but I think she eventually gets hit with something like everybody other than basically Nunes has against Cyborg, and I think it's going to rattle her a little bit. Like I said, a huge step up from the Olga Rubins and no offense to any of her opponents. She's fought some tough girls in Bellator, but I think this is a different animal for a world championship. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to this card. I'm looking forward to this more than I was looking forward to last weekend's card. And plus another little note, when you talk about the big show, I mean, this event is at the LA Forum. I don't know how ticket sales are going right now. There's still quite a bit available. When it's all said and done, there's going to be 8,000-9,000 people likely in the arena. Julia Budd's made her career basically fighting in smaller Indian reservation casinos in Oklahoma and such like that. So you could see a little bit of the bright lights effect that could potentially happen if that arena's rocking. Cyborg has a huge following, especially here in Southern California, and that she's going to get a huge pop when she comes out. So.
Well, what's interesting about this is like they're both. The event's going on this weekend. You got the UFC event on ESPN Plus streaming, and then we got the DAZN. This is a DAZN exclusive event, and they're both streaming. So I wonder how do they figure the metrics? I mean, you probably get inside stuff for that, Nolan. I mean, I'm sure you'll have reports the following Tuesday, Wednesday after the weekend or whatever. But the only reason I'm bringing it up is because did you guys read that Variety thing about how the future of Bellator and with Viacom, like Steven Espinosa is supposed to be like the guy that Scott Coker reports to now? And
I did see that. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm not sure. The vibes that I'm getting is that people don't really know.
Yeah.
Like they know as much as we do. A lot of the people that work for Bellator and management, whatever. I feel like it hasn't necessarily even been figured out from people above them. So I think as of now, like the door's kind of open for anything to happen. It doesn't mean that it will. It doesn't mean that it is probably there's going to be a shakeup. But it means that the things are in, certain procedures are in place where that could happen, and there's a possibility. So there's been no indication of that yet, but who knows? It could come in. At that time, it would be kind of interesting to see what happens. I'm sure that television deals and Showtime and all that stuff will be a potential part of this. But beyond that, in terms of like the big picture stuff, in terms of the path that Bellator wants to pursue, I'm not really sure how this would impact that. I don't think anybody really knows. So we'll have to stay tuned.
Yeah, it's only January, but the way I look at it is. At first I was like, "Oh, Steven Espinosa, yuck," because of the whole thing when they co-promoted the whole Maymac thing in the UFC. But it's Showtime CBS or Viacom CBS and Showtime. So if this gets Bellator on CBS, that could be great for Bellator. So that's the only plus that I see. And the other thing is like then if they start doing events on CBS, are they going to keep doing this multi-year? Because I don't know how long the DAZN deal was when they initially announced it. I went to the announcement, when Bellator announced it here in New York back in 2016, I think it was, and they called the I actually looked for the email when that first happened. They called it a multi-year deal, so I don't know how many years the multi-year deal's supposed to be for, but I mean, I just feel like that's passing the buck to changing the management like that's usually concerning. But again, I mean, we just watch and write about the fights. We don't know the business end of stuff, so like it's only January. We'll see what happens. So I mean, what do you think, Matt? It's worth signing up for DAZN now, or should I wait until an event pops up on CBS?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd prepay for a whole year right now. If Bellator's
Yeah.
your go-to event, I would wait and see what happens there. Uh, the initial feeling was not good, just because you kind of start having the flashbacks to Strikeforce wrapping up, but then you also got to remember how popular Strikeforce became on the on the Showtime and CBS platform for the couple shows they had.
Yeah.
I'll never understand for the life of me why, if Viacom owns Bellator, why we're not seeing them on CBS, even if it's once or twice a year. Um, a Saturday night CBS lineup is, I mean, I don't even know what they have on it, but and nothing.
Yeah.
You're gonna get, promote your events, get the names out there. That's how you do it. When Strikeforce was on before the Nashville brawl incident, which basically put that to an end. Fedor had a huge. I think he drew like 4 or 5 million, which is 2 million more than the UFC was drawn on Fox in the last few years. You had the Elite XC, which killed it. It was a different time in MMA when people were kind of just coming over the hump and seeing guys like Kimbo Slice and Brock Lesnar and stuff like that. So there was a huge draw to it. Gina Carano, people like that, really carrying the torch. But I just, you got some guys like AJ McKee. I mean, Bellator has some gold.
Oh yeah,
some
absolutely.
gold there, and if they figure out how to get their name out there, and you get some kind of backing, and you pull a $3 million, $4 million or you view show on CBS, I think you can really sway the whole world of where MMA is right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you see guys wanting to UFC. I think a lot of people opinion on Espinoza. I didn't know Espinoza really prior to the Mayweather McGregor thing, and I think we can all agree that it's probably easier for Espinoza to deal with somebody like Scott Coker than it is for him and Dana White. So I think that they might be able to work together in a more cohesive manner. Bellator's not trying to load the prelim, stuff like that. So you're not. You could go back to having 5 or 6 fight cards. Essentially, if you really needed to, if it was just like a challenger show or something like that to get on Showtime and keep getting your guys out there and just have one big main event. Maybe you have AJ McKee or somebody, and then you have 5 up and coming bouts or something like that. So you really could start to work that out. And I mean, it's really what we don't have. We don't really have we don't have a challenger show like we did, and Dana White's show fills that gap. But
So I mean, it's the beginning again. It's January. A lot can happen. We got a lot to look forward to for the rest of the year. Nolan's putting in work over there at MMA Junkie, writing some really good articles on the doorstep stuff and a lot of stuff talking about gold in MMA and talent coming up. So Nolan, before we close out, why don't you let us know what you're working on, where folks can follow you?
Yeah, of course. You guys can follow me. I forgot to include it down here, but you can follow me on Twitter at MMA_Kings, on Instagram at MMA or at Nolan King MMA. And yeah, I got some exciting stuff coming out. Busy time of year for MMA Junkie, but I can't complain. I have a feature coming out on a fighter who's undergone some medical issues recently. I got that coming out at the end of the week. Former UFC or current UFC fighter. Then I also will have On the Doorstep coming out for February. February is one of the best months in a while for regional MMA. There's a lot of shows that are, they take December, January off, and then February they're back. So the regional scene's strong in February. I'll have that coming out. And then as far as other coverage goes, I'll be down in Mohegan in March. I think Ed, I might see you there, and
Yes, sir.
yeah, just stay tuned, guys. We got a lot of good stuff coming.
Awesome. You're doing a great job. Congratulations on the full-time gig
Thank
over
you. I
there at
appreciate that,
Junkie.
guys.
Yeah, I mean, you're top dog right now, in my opinion, on this stuff. So I enjoy your reading.
Thank you.
And,
Appreciate it.
especially,
I always love coming on here to talk fights with people that know what they're talking about. I love it. So
yeah, and obviously we really appreciate you coming on here and giving us your time.
anytime.
Fans can follow us at Combat Hour on Twitter, Coast to Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Follow myself at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. Follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter and Carbeerzol on Instagram. He calls me the drunk, but he's got beer in his Instagram name. So until next time, folks, this is the Combat Hour, and thanks for listening.
Peace.
Is it bad? I've never noticed that.